And we are live on YouTube. And I'm going to let everybody in. Everybody ready? Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is the Montgomery County Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We're just letting everybody in. Takes a couple of minutes. Welcome. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We just opened the doors on Zoom. Takes a couple of minutes to get everybody on, but welcome to all of you. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay, I guess we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Losack. I'm co-founder and executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. We are the first and only regional nonprofit dedicated exclusively to renter outreach, education, organizing, and advocacy. This is our first Renter Town Hall in the month of August. We'll have another one on the 24th of this month. We are joined this evening with a number of important people and special guests. First, it is our pleasure to have with us the county executive for Montgomery County, Mark Elrich, as well as our state delegate, Janelle Wilkins, who's also a board member of the Renters Alliance, and two county officials to answer questions and address issues going on in the county. Nicole Catravanos, the manager of the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, and Fernando Ortega from Health and Human Services, who's staffing the COVID rent relief program, as well as Renters Alliance staff. I'd like to ask you if you have any questions or concerns to please put them in the chat. The Renters Alliance staff, Pat Beckham, Malek Demir, and David Mullins will be monitoring and will be making sure that we address these questions and concerns. I'm also joined by our vice chair of our board, Chris Perry. With that, let us welcome the county executive, Mark Elrich, for some opening remarks. Mr. Elrich.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
So thanks for asking me to join you tonight. This is really important. We're seeing these very large rent increases, and it's not just a Montgomery County issue. Frankly, it's a national issue. They're writing about this, all across the country, lots of different jurisdictions. And it threatens to have a really profound effect on the people who live, particularly in Montgomery County. Some jurisdictions have more balanced housing. They've got more affordability. Montgomery County's affordability, particularly deep affordability, is limited. When people lose an apartment that they can afford at 30 or 40% of area median incomes, and they lose that apartment, it is extremely challenging to find another similar unit. If people have, bad credit or, lower incomes than landlords are willing to accept as tenants, then if they get displaced, they may find it impossible or extremely difficult to even get vacant units if they don't meet the income or credit worthiness requirements of a new landlord. So there are a lot of reasons why this is worse and in ways more complicated than simply being the case of large rent increases. So I worry about this, and I think it's no loss of irony at a time when people keep talking about affordable housing and the need for affordable housing, that too many people are willing to walk away from dealing with an actual crisis in the moment where people are going to lose their affordable housing. And, on the one hand, they may have very hard times increasing requirements for affordable housing that we impose on developers, but are unwilling to do things to protect tenants from losing their homes. And I just think it's a shame, and I think it's going to cause real problems. I don't think it's going to be just a one-year phenomenon. There's no indication that inflation is going to go completely back in the bottle. And, all it would take would be a couple of years of increases at the rate that some people are seeing before a whole bunch of Montgomery County's existing affordable housing ceases to be affordable. I remind people that parking planning itself projected that between 2020 and 2030, the county would lose 11,000 of its remaining 20-something thousand natural occurring affordable housing units, and that was assuming normal inflation. This year's inflation is likely to be the equivalent of several years' inflation, and so that 11,000 may prove to both to be a small number, and it may prove to be something that happens faster than by 2030. So I think there's a lot to worry about, and I think we have an obligation to avert this kind of social disaster, which I think has the potential to become. So I'm hopeful that when the council comes back, they'll look at this differently. I'm hopeful that with the new council, there will be new council members who look at this and will feel compelled to do something more permanent so that we can get a better handle on preserving the affordability of the housing that we do have while we work to figure out how do you build, provide more, and preserve more of the housing that we have. But, we've got a short-term immediate problem, and we've got long-term problems. So I'm anxious, most of us, well, I would say most of us, but, people like me, this is not something we worry about now. And it's real easy for people to forget that something's not their reality. They don't always realize that it still exists, even when it's not their reality. And I hope that people are, whether they're affected by this or not, but even those who aren't, understand what the reality is going to mean for people in the county. So I'm happy to continue working with you. I appreciate your continuing organization. I hope that, we do everything possible to quantify this so when the council comes back, we can put more flesh on the bone. We can provide more detailed examples of what people are experiencing. Maybe that will help the council understand the urgency of acting. So I'd stop there. If anybody had a question for me, I'm happy to try to answer.
I just wanted to make a comment to remind the people who are listening that County Executive Elrich and the Renters Alliance and many people on this call have been working on this issue for quite a long time. Mr. Elrich was with us when we formed the Tenants Work Group, thanks to his leadership, when he was a council member. He was the first council member to pass comprehensive renter protection legislation in Montgomery County and has been supportive of our work for quite some time. And we're very grateful for his leadership. As he said, we have quite a crisis coming, and we are looking forward to his continued leadership in this area, and especially looking toward the council to partner with him and with us and the people of Montgomery County to stabilize affordable housing in our region. It is a national problem, but we're here in Montgomery County doing what we can do. So, Mr. Elrich, I want to thank you for taking time out this evening on short notice, but recognizing that this crisis is beginning to bloom all around us and there is attention to it. And so we thank you. If there are any questions from the panel right now, now would be the time to ask. Hearing none, then Mr. Edwards, thank you. We know you're on to your next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
And with that, also giving us leadership for many, many years, and a proud member of the Renters Alliance Board of Directors, even before she became a state delegate, we have with us Janelle Wilkins, who is our leader in Annapolis on renter issues. Janelle?
Thank you so much, Matt, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am State Delegate Janelle Wilkins. I represent District 20 in Montgomery County, which is the Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, and White Oak areas. And I've represented this district, been in the legislature since 2017. The issues of renters, in addition to being a board member of the Renters Alliance, has been one of my top priorities in the legislature, working to ensure that people in our community, every single person in our community, is able to have a safe, affordable place to live and a stable place to live. And that stability has been in question and in crisis for a number of years now. First with the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to make sure that everyone has a healthy place, a roof over their heads during the time where we asked everyone to stay home. And with the high unemployment rates, trying to ensure that people were able to pay their rents and have that rental assistance, which we're still working to get out the door now as well. And now we're in this time of crisis where we're seeing rent prices increase exponentially. I saw a statistic that in Maryland, the rent increases have averaged 7.6%. That is a huge increase and something that is just completely undoable for most people. A 1%, 2%, 3% increase is undoable for many. So a 7.6%, it's time for us to really step in and step up. So I'm here to say that there are legislators who represent you, who are advocating for you, who care about this. We're going to be working to make sure that we're using every resource at our disposal, but we have to make sure that your legislators that represent you are hearing from you directly as well, because many may be thinking, not in my community, we don't have this issue. I haven't heard from anyone. We do not want any of your elected officials to be thinking that. So please be sure to share and communicate with them. And we are going to, during this session, be educating ourselves, have the opportunity to answer questions as well to make sure that we are able to help and support as many of you as possible that are on this line. So thank you for being here. Please reach out to my office if we can be helpful, especially if you are at Silver Spring, White Oak, Tacoma Park resident. I'll make sure my information is in the chat. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you so much for bringing us together, Matt.
Thank you, Delegate Wilkins. Always a pleasure. Delegate Wilkins has been a champion on so many fronts for renters. She was a renter herself. She sometimes leaves that out, but she's one of us. And she's also the lead champion on just cause eviction legislation. And that is so important. And we don't have that protection yet. And we have come so close thanks to her leadership. The Montgomery County delegation, the state delegation, the vast majority of them supported her legislation. That would make it required that a landlord provide a justification not to renew a lease year to year. Right now, with just 60 days notice, a landlord could say we're not going to renew and not provide a reason why they're not going to renew, adding to the housing destabilization and frankly, fear among tenants who are simply pursuing their rights and to promised and required services in their buildings. So again, Delegate Wilkins, thank you as always for your service to us and your participation on the Renters Alliance Board. And thank you also for coming on short notice. But today we saw quite a bit of attention to this issue with the White House Summit on Evictions, with stories in the Post, stories on WTOP, stories in the Associated Press. This is a very important regional and national issue. So thank you for coming tonight. Okay, with that, then we'll get to our regularly scheduled program. We have with us this evening two important guests from the Montgomery County government. We know that everybody is deeply concerned about the rent relief program and whether or not they're eligible to receive COVID rent relief and other services. So we have with us here tonight Fernando Ortega from Health and Human Services, who is also working on the COVID rent relief program. So we'll turn it to you, Fernando.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invite. I'm taking over the COVID rent relief program here in Montgomery County. Been here just over 2.5 weeks or so. So kind of getting my arms around it, seeing, what we're doing and what ways we can improve it. So real quick, I just want to kind of go over what the program is and kind of what some of the eligibility requirements are. So this is a program, this is the 4th iteration of this program that we've had. It started because of the COVID-19 outbreak. It's designed to help folks who are facing eviction, who have had a crisis due to COVID-19. So basically, what our requirement is currently is we took the date of June 30th. You have to have 2 months total that you're behind in rent as of June 30th going forward. That's one of the requirements. The other requirement is that you had to have had some sort of hardship due to COVID-19 and kind of show that. You also have to be under the 50% AMI in order to qualify. And again, it's just an application on the portal. You can go to Montgomery County website, look up the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and fill out an application. The way that it's not really a first come, first serve type of process. The way we do it, we're kind of triaging it based on where the person is in the eviction process. So those who have a red and white notice or are in danger of the sheriff coming and taking them out of their home, those are the highest priority. And as we come down, we go from there. Not sure if there's any other questions. At this time, we don't have a good grasp on how long the portal will be open. However, we'll definitely put out that information at least 2 weeks in advance of when we're going to close the portal again.
Fernando,
Anything else, Fernando?
could you just let the listeners know what AMI is?
I'm sorry, say again?
Could you just explain what AMI is?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the
listeners?
AMI is the area median income. So it's based on where you live. So it depends on your household size. And we have a chart there that kind of describes, what 50% AMI is and what 30% AMI is based on the size of your house, what your household is and what your annual median income.
Thank you.
My understanding, Fernando, is that there is approximately $30 million available for this process, and that's to include finishing off those who have already applied in the previous program, and that whatever's left will then apply to the latest phase? Yes, yeah, that's correct. And our goal is to hopefully be able to churn out $1 million a week. We're ramping back up. This last week, I think we were at 560,000, and we're continuing to ramp up as we get more applications and are able to process more applications. For many people who are in the pipeline, can you explain your prioritization of processing? Yeah, so like I said earlier, the prioritization is basically on as far as where you are in the eviction process. So those who are at most risk of losing their housing, as far as they've already had a judgment, they are now have a red and white notice, and the sheriff is planning to go out there. Those are going to be our most urgent cases. Again, our goal is to keep everybody housed. Obviously, anytime you're facing eviction, anytime that you're anywhere in that process, it's a very stressful time for a family. So, we understand that. But again, we're trying to triage it from
the most susceptible and most in danger of losing housing downward. As we get, continue to go through the applications, hopefully we will get it, closer to when the eviction first starts. But at this time, we're just really trying to get those, that are facing immediate ejection from their location.
So we understand that many people will have applied when they first get a notice to vacate or a threatening notice from their landlord. Those of you who are not familiar with that process, and maybe Nicole, you can jump in here, but it begins with first probably, you're behind in your rent, there's some communication from your landlord, and then how does the eviction process escalate with communications?
Right. So good evening, everybody. With respect to this question, typically what should happen is that the landlord should provide the tenant what's called a summary ejectment. It's a very formal court-looking document that basically informs the tenant that they're behind on rent and by how many months and how much. And then within 10 days, if the tenant has not paid the amount that they owe, then the landlord can file a claim in district court. Typically, in this case, it'd be a failure to pay rent case. At that point, once it's filed in court, a summons is issued, and it's typically posted on the tenant's door with the date of the hearing. And at the hearing, the judge will decide if the amount owed is correct. The tenant has the opportunity to bring any proof that they may have, if they have paid rent, if they have any COVID applications pending or not. And if the tenant provides proof that it's been paid, normally the judge will dismiss the case. If a tenant does not go to court, which we always encourage everybody to always go no matter what, then more than likely a judgment will be entered against you in court. And at that point, that gives the landlord the green light to move forward, eventually filed what's called a warrant of restitution, which then allows them to contact the sheriff and be able to schedule an eviction date. And once that happens, the sheriff of Montgomery County will typically post a red and white notice on your door and schedule an eviction. And at that point, that's when legally, as a tenant, you have to leave the property, not a day before. And of course, on failure to pay rents, you have up until the date of the actual eviction to be able to pay the amount on the failure to pay rent judgment to stay.
So Fernando, where in that process, how do you want to be informed? It's our understanding in the past that as tenants unfortunately escalate toward the red and white, the sheriff's notice, that your department needs to know where they are in order to prioritize their case. How would you like tenants to inform you, and when?
So the way that we have been getting, what we do is we have the sheriff's office that they'll send us a list of the planned evictions in the next week or two. So when it gets to that point, we're definitely what we're calling, putting them on the hot list and making sure that we get payment. As Nicole kind of alluded to, you don't have to leave, the premises until you get to that point where the sheriff comes to your house. There are times where we're able to get a check for the entire judgment amount to the resident, and they're able to give it to the sheriff, and the sheriff just turns around and walks back away, and you're good from there. But that's kind of where we're at right now. That's kind of how we're getting, where those folks are who are in immediate danger of being evicted. That's how we're getting it, but we're continuing to work down from there, the cases as they get closer to eviction.
I just wanted to be specific. The white court form that Nicole Catravanos mentioned is the first warning after well, it's not the first warning. You might get something from the property manager or the landlord saying, hey, you owe us money, or from their lawyer saying, pay up or else. But then you're going to get this 10-day court notice. Is that when HHS wants to know that your case is escalated, or do you want them to know when they receive a court summons, or where in this process should they email you at the link I just put, the email I just put in the chat? When do you want to be informed that the case is escalated?
Yeah, I think once you get to court, if you've already put in an application and you get to court, I think sending out an email to that saying, hey, look, I just got my court date, or I'm at court. This is where I'm at. That'll kind of trigger us to look at it and, you know, be able to put it on the hot list in order to get that expedited so that, you know, we can get it out to you.
And Matt, if I can just jump in to just make a little connection to state policy and the work that we're doing in the legislature. We did pass a bill this year that has become law that requires a landlord to accept payment from a third party like county government, because before it was not clear, and we saw that some landlords were not willing to accept it. And so we did make it clear in law that payment for failure to pay rent is something that's acceptable. We did also pass a bill to basically have a stay of an eviction while you are applying for rental assistance. And it did pass, but unfortunately, Governor Hogan did veto that bill. So I just wanted to insert those policy pieces because we have been working to take action on this. And we will continue to work to pass legislation to help keep people in their homes, and definitely need more partners in the governor's office and throughout the legislature to make sure we're able to support that and make sure that evictions are greatly reduced.
Yes, indeed. Elections have consequences. The Renters Alliance does not choose candidates or parties, but we do urge every renter to vote. And so we have a election coming up in November, and if you want your interests to be represented, we urge you to get involved in the election process. Right, and I also should give credit to our other board member, Delegate Vaughn Stewart, who was the lead sponsor of that bill, along with support from Delegate Wilkins and other renter champions in Annapolis. Do we have any questions, staff, from our attendees?
Yes, Fernando.
Or Fernando?
Yes, we have a listener who wants to know if the case was closed during the COVID epidemic. Can she, once she receives a notice from the court, can she reapply? Can she put in another application?
So if she had applied before under the Rent Relief 3, for example, and it was closed, yes, she can reapply during this phase.
Maybe we should qualify that a little bit. If they received, I believe the program, and Fernando, correct me if I'm wrong or not up to date on the information, but the maximum amount that you all would pay any individual would be either 18 months of rent or $12,000, whichever is no more than 12,000 either way.
Correct.
Is that right?
That's correct.
So if they've already applied and received $12,000, they would not be eligible to apply again. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I guess I was understanding the question is if they either got denied or they received some and it closed out previously. If they haven't hit that max, then yes, they can apply again. Or if they didn't qualify then for, you know, maybe they weren't quite behind enough at that point, or maybe they were above AMI. At this point, they could apply again.
Right, AMI, area median income. There is a chart somewhere on the county website about what that is, whether you're a single person or two people or a family with children, your area median income is different on that chart. Also, if you've been denied for whatever reason, in some cases because you did not provide the paperwork that was requested, when they say denied, they don't mean that you're not qualified anymore. They just mean that they're not going to process your application any further, because they have so many, until they receive that information. If you don't understand why you've been denied, or you think you've been denied unfairly, we work with Health and Human Services to investigate that, and where appropriate, to get them to reopen the case. So if you're not sure what's happening, the Renters Alliance is also here to help, along with our partners, HIP, the Housing Investment Partnership, Nicole, did I get that right? Housing Initiative Partnership, I think, the Latin Economic Development Corporation, and Legal Aid, of course, and CASA. These are all groups that are working with tenants, but we're here to help as well. The info at Renters Alliance is the way to contact us. If you have any questions, we'll help you navigate. Any other questions for Fernando, Malek, Pat, or David Mullins?
I have a couple. One is the COVID rent relief funds, do they apply toward late fees? So can you get your late fees paid?
Yeah, we ask the landlords to waive late fees. They don't always do that, but we can include late fees in the overall what they owe, because we kind of take a look at their ledger and see exactly what they owe, and then kind of go from there.
Okay. And the second
Nicole,
question,
wasn't there a law about late fees that if they, was it a federal law or a local law that allowed a affirmation of some kind of form that said that late fees should be rescinded?
There was a form, it's no longer in effect and needed to be provided during a certain period of time, and then your late fees could have been waived, but it's no longer, it doesn't apply for rent now.
When, do you know when it expired?
I want to say February or March. I can look into that and give you the exact date.
Okay, just wondering if for those that it could have qualified for, that you did have that option. What else, Malek?
one more question is, if you're 2 months behind as of June 30th, and now you're behind July and August, can you apply for rent relief for 4 months?
Yeah, so if you, as of June 30th, basically you're applying as a pay on late behind at this point. Yes, we can help you with what you're now late as well, as long as it doesn't go over the total max amount.
Okay, great, thank you. That's it.
Any others, Pat or David?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, but oh, go ahead, Pat.
No, I was just saying we had one listener who asked, she applied for HOC as well as COVID-19, and she wanted to know if they were the same, and they are not. They're two different programs.
Okay. So just to be clear, right now, Nicole Katravanos, late fees can be applied. Is that correct?
That's
Right.
correct.
Okay. Any other questions? There were a number in the questions and answers in the Q&A. Did we get all of those?
Yeah, sorry if you did cover this, but there was one person seeking clarification on the financially impacted due to COVID, whether that had to be during the quote unquote, pandemic. I think they mean the higher emergency time, or if that, if there's a broader reading of that. And
It has to be a hardship that was caused by COVID somehow. So like when you write the impact statement, you kind of, there's got to be a reason why, it doesn't have to necessarily be during that government federally, the one where they dictated exactly, okay, well, this is during this time. But if for whatever reason during COVID that you lost your job, or you weren't able to, work as much because, they shut down or whatever the different cases may be. Again, it's a case by case. There's no like strict guidelines. So it's just important that when you apply, you make it known exactly what the reasoning was how it relates to COVID-19.
Right, and I'd like to advise our residents who hear this to make sure that the program is interested in the COVID impact. There may be other things going on, but that's not the first foot forward in your communication. If your hours were reduced because of COVID, that's a reason. If you were sick because of COVID and couldn't work, that's a reason. So if you need some guidance on that, we can help you. But if you were homesick with COVID and broke your ankle and couldn't go to work, don't report that the reason you couldn't go to work was because you broke your ankle. Okay, so we will help you with that and make sure that you've got your bases covered. This is a federally mandated program that has rules. They're federal laws, and we want to make sure that the people who are working on this program are able to do so ethically and legally to help you. One other area, Fernando, I don't know if you're in a position to answer this, but there are many, many people, in addition to those who are impacted by COVID, who are behind in their rent, who are facing eviction. Are you able to answer a little bit more about what Services to End and Prevent Homelessness can provide to those who would not qualify for the COVID rent relief program?
You know, I'm not really up on all the other different programs. I know that HSS has quite a few different eviction prevention programs. There's certain programs, if you have a household member who I think is 55 or 65 and above and has a disability, there's a special program for that. I'm not really probably the one to speak on all those different programs, however.
Very good. Well, let me just say then briefly, and Nicole, you jump in if there's something I'm missing, but there are available funds, I believe up to 3,000 or 3,500, I'm not sure of the exact figure, to help, if necessary, to put your belongings in storage if you're going to be evicted, to help you with your security deposit and moving expenses if necessary, and other types of emergency support provided by the Services to End and Prevent Homelessness as part of county available funds. You know, all help, support is not lost if you don't qualify for COVID rent relief. Again, if you're in that situation, we urge you not to wait. Reach out to us. We'll help you navigate what's available and connect you to the right resource. And we always, as Ms. Catravanos said, urge you to go to court. If you have a court date, do not miss that court date. We've seen cases that when the landlord is even justified in saying that you are not able to pay your rent and you're behind, where the judge might continue the case or dismiss it and allow you more time to pursue these resources. But none of that will happen if you don't go to court. There is also legal resources in the court by the Homeless Prevention, HPRP, Homeless Persons Representation Project, and Legal Aid and CASA, which sometimes have lawyers in the court providing guidance and advice. So you should avail yourselves of those resources. But if you're in this situation and you don't know what to do, don't wait until it becomes a crisis. And God forbid, until the time when the sheriff puts a red and white notice on your door saying within a week or two, they're going to come with the landlord and put your belongings on the street if you don't move. So we don't want you to get in that situation. That is a crisis. Anything else, Fernando, that you'd like to add?
No, again, if you have any questions, you can email HHS at montgomerycountymd.gov. I believe there's a phone number on the website as well, 311. You can call as well.
Is it HHS or do you want HSS?
So I said, right? HSS.
No, you said HHS. Everybody does it. You're in good company.
HSS at Montgomery County.
HSS. The devil somehow got involved with this and decided to change the email to make it more complicated. But it is HSS at montgomerycountymd.gov to inform Health and Human Services that you need support or that your case is escalating. And again, it's info@rentersalliance.org. We're also here to help you navigate this. It's complicated for us, so don't think that it's you. It's a lot of people find this very difficult. So with that, Fernando Ortega, if you're able to stay in case other questions come in, you're more than welcome to do so. But we thank you and welcome you to the county government and thank you for your service and all that you're doing. It's very vital.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you having me.
You betcha. And now let us turn to the manager of the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, Ms. Nicole Catravanos.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me, Matt. So I've been asked to come today to talk a little bit regarding what the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs is seeing in the landlord tenant world, specifically in respect to rent increases, what services we have to offer, what our limitations are, and how to access our services. So as far as rent increases, we've been working closely with our community partners, including Renters Alliance, to encourage all tenants to report any rent increases which they deem to be excessive. The reason being was because one, we'd like to have a way to document it, and two, to see if there's any way that we can assist tenants in that process and to make sure that their rights are being upheld and that they're receiving proper notice. So on that end, at this point, we've received a total of 77 self-reported excessive rent increases. The average of those 77 reports is an increase of 22%.
Wow.
Some of these rent increases vary. Some of them are rent increases for month to month, which typically are the ones at the higher end of the spectrum. And it's historically, landlords always have much higher rent increases, increases of rent from month to month. Some of them are year to year, and some of them are every 2 years. So we've been doing our best to try to provide support to the tenants and also try to inform landlords of what their obligations are. In doing so, we have asked tenants when they do report a rent increase that one, they always attach the rent increase notice. The main reason being is that Montgomery County Code Chapter 29 mandates the landlord to include certain terminology in that rent notice. If those mandates are not included in the rent notice, then the rent notice becomes defective, which means it can't be enforced and a new one needs to be issued. Now, in the scope of the reality that we are in Montgomery County, because we do not have a rent cap, because Bill 2222 hasn't been heard or decided on, there is no cap for landlords. At this point, landlords can increase the rent to however much they choose. And if we can look at those rent increases and if we can identify the ones that are defective, essentially it allows us to contact the landlord, make them remedy the defectivenesses in the notice, reissue, and buy more time for the for the tenant. And that's buy more time either to get your plans in order if you're going to leave and relocate, or, if the possibility of Bill 2222 passing sometime in September, then it would force landlords to decrease the rent increase to a 4.4. We have seen a number of defective notices. The requirements on a notice, and I'm not expecting everyone to memorize this, is that it has to state the current rent, it has to state the future rent, it has to state the percentage increase. It has to state what the percentage voluntary rent guideline is. And it also has to have a note with our contact information, the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, Department of Housing and Communication, so that you can contact us if you have questions. If all of that information isn't provided in the rent increase notice, it's essentially defective and it can't be enforced. So again, through this means, I encourage everyone to please email us. That's the best way, at ulta.intake@montgomerycounty.gov if you've received what you consider to be an excessive rent increase, and please attach your rent increase so we can at least review that for you and see if it is defective. And if it is defective, we can work on your behalf to at least get that reissued and buy you more time.
Nicole, if I could add also in your enforcement of that, in the past, it's been that if somebody received a defective renewal notice that doesn't include those elements you listed, and that the tenant is now paying 5%, 10%, 22%, 50%, as we've seen, more in rent, and they've been paying it for some time and discovered that the renewal notice is defective. In the past, the enforcement has required the landlord to credit forward any increase in rent that the tenant has paid and then reissue the renewal notice. Is that still the standard?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually we get involved before it's actually implemented, before the tenant starts paying this increase notice. But if you're in a position where you received the rent increase notice 4 months ago, well, you shouldn't have if it was above a 4.4, but or 1.4. But if you have, then we can review it. And if it was unlawful, and if you are paying that unlawful increased amount, then we can mediate with the landlords and get that credited to you. Yes. Which kind of leads me into the next step of how to access our services. The best way is to file a complaint, and you can find our complaint form online on the Department of Housing website, Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, and you can email that to our email. We ask that you please attach all relevant information, including your lease, any photographs you may have, any notices you may have, any receipts that you may have, depending on what your issue is. And then it gets assigned to an investigator. An investigator will then reach out to you. They'll reach out to the landlord. They are a third party, a third neutral party. They do not advocate for either side. And they try to work with both the tenant and the landlord to come to an agreement through a conciliation process. As far as the issues that can be brought to our office, as long as it's in our jurisdiction, meaning that it's in Montgomery County, it's not in the city of Gaithersburg or city of Tacoma Park or city of Rockville, and as long as it's within Chapter 29, meaning that typically the landlord doesn't live in the property, then it's an issue that we can more than likely address. And the investigator will do their best to try to mediate. If a resolution is achieved, then a consent agreement will be drafted. Both parties can sign it, and it will bound essentially both parties. And there is an enforcement process behind that. If a conciliation is not fruitful, then we will either issue a determination letter. If the investigator finds that the facts are clear, that the law is clear, and they can issue a determination whether the landlord owes money or whether the tenant doesn't have a lawful claim, whatever the situation may be, they will issue that. And if there is a question of law, if there is a question of fact, it can then be referred to our commission, which will decide if they will take the case or not. And if they do, they will set it for a hearing, and a trial will be held where parties can opt to be represented. They can provide testimony, they can provide evidence, they can provide witnesses, and the decision made by the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs Commission has the same weight as if it were made by a judge in district court. So that's a summary of the complaint process. You know, it can take anywhere from 3 months to 8 months, depending on how complex it is, depending on how available parties are to communicate and provide information. In addition to the complaint process, we do answer inquiries. If you just want to know what your rights are, or if you want to know about resources in the community, you can call us via 311 and ask for the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, or you can email us, and we do typically respond within 24 hours. So that's a summary of our complaint process. In addition to that, what we've been trying to do, because it is much more impactful, and what Matt has asked me to discuss, is called administrative cases. In these types of cases, the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs is essentially the complainant. They're the complaining party. And when an issue has been brought to our attention where we see that there's a systemic violation of landlord-tenant law, then we can open a complaint, and we can file that complaint on behalf of a landlord and a management company. In order to do so, we have to see that it's systemic. We need to see that it's unlawful, and it allows us to communicate with the landlord and address the issue much quickly, and it impacts everybody in the housing community. So instead of just remedying one person's situation, it essentially remedies all the tenants in that building, and it just has a much stronger impact. So if you see situations that you think aren't just pertaining to you, that it's an unlawful institutional practice, and you'd like to bring it to our attention, please do. You can do it through Renters Alliance, and they can communicate with us, or you can do it directly with us, and we'd be happy to investigate that further and see if it has the qualifications and if we deem it appropriate for an administrative case.
Nicole, let me give some examples of what that might look like, and thank you for bringing this up.
Sure.
If you receive, for example, a renewal notice that is defective, renewal notice just says, "Hi there, you owe us an extra $200 a month, and you're, and that's it." that is a defective notice. It is likely that that notice didn't just go to you, but that is the practice of the property management company or the landlord. And therefore, it might be a systemic problem that needs to be corrected. One would think that maybe the first step might be some education for a new property manager to understand what the law is, but sometimes there's something else going on. But that gives the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs the opportunity to go after the practice of the entire complex, not just deal with a single complaint. Another one might be, which we've seen today, for example, where property staff are becoming an obstruction to tenants holding tenant association meetings, for example. That might be another administrative concern that deals with the entire community, not just an individual complaint. Nicole, is there anything else that comes to mind?
Discrimination practices. It's a very touchy subject. It's not easy to prove, but if you believe that it is a practice, and if there are multiple people willing to testify, and if you believe it's potentially a strong case, typically it is the jurisdiction of the Office of Human Rights. So you can always contact them and let them know as well.
One of those examples might be, and we've seen this, where it appears that some property management companies, especially new ones to the county who take over properties and would like to move out folks who are receiving public assistance and move in higher paying tenants, that if that is a pattern in practice, it is illegal and would be something that the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs and others might be interested in intervening and enforcing on. Okay, what else? Anything else, Nicole?
I think it's worth highlighting also another office in our department, which is the Code Enforcement Office. The Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs works very closely with code. And the main reason being is because even though we have two separate complaint processes, many times we end up working together with the same tenant or the same landlord. So the difference between the two is if as a tenant, you have a sole issue of maintenance, and the only remedy that you want is for that maintenance issue to be fixed, then you should be reaching out to code enforcement and filing a complaint with code enforcement. They will send an inspector out, they will notify you in advance, they will do a whole search of the property. If they see any violations, they will give the landlord a certain period of time to remedy them, depending if it's urgent or not. If it's not urgent, it's usually 30 days. If it is urgent, it's anywhere between 24 and 48 hours. And then they do a second re-inspection, and if the landlord hasn't corrected the violations within the time frame that the inspector has provided, then they can be issued a citation. So again, if your only issue is a maintenance issue, let's say there's infestation, or let's say there's leaking, or there's cracks on your walls or holes in your walls, and the only remedy you want is for that to get fixed, then you should be contacting the office, the code enforcement office, and filing a complaint through them. If in addition to that, you would like another type of remedy from your landlord, like let's say you've had an issue with rodents and you want your rent to be decreased for the month that you had to live in the unit with the rodents, then that's when you file a complaint through our office. We send a copy to code to send an inspector out, and then we help with mediating with the landlord to get the additional portion of relief that you want, which would be the decreased rent. In the alternative, if you have another issue that's not related to any type of maintenance, but let's say it's about a fee that's been tacked on, let's say it has to do with the fact that you believe that your ledger of your payment history isn't correct, then in those types of situations, you can just file a complaint with our office and we will provide assistance.
So just to underscore two things. The code enforcement deals with maintenance complaints, broken appliances, vermin, rats, vermin, cockroaches. They also inspect properties at least once every 3 years and always when there is a complaint. Those inspections could be anywhere from 10% of all the units in the building to a 100% inspection. depending on the level of violations that they're seeing. So if you feel that there's something amiss in terms of building upkeep and maintenance after you've brought this to the attention of the property management of the landlord first, of course, give them an opportunity to fix it. But if they're not responsive, that's your avenue. Lease disputes, issues of your rights and quality of life in the building. If you feel that you're not getting your rights or promised or required services, then that's the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs at ulta.intake@montgomerycountymd.gov or by calling 311. Do we have questions for Ms. Katravenos? Alec or David or Pat? Anybody paying attention to our
No,
questions?
We
let's,
had, go ahead, Malek.
that's it.
Alec first.
No, okay. I'm not seeing anything, so there you go.
We had
Right, sir.
questions, there were questions earlier before about rent increases. And so I'm just hoping, I just want to, say that we saw those and hopefully, that the ulta.intake email, if you think it's unreasonable, or if you wonder, that is, please reach out to there about that. And there were questions about whether the bill passed at the county level. So I don't know if, because that was at the very beginning, if you want to give that update again, that there's not, that it didn't pass, but there were just a few of those questions.
Nicole, do you want to address that?
Sure. So Bill 2222 did not pass. Council is going to decide in September. They're going to revisit it in September. So we have to wait until September to see what's going to happen. And that's specifically regarding the temporary 6-month rent cap at 4.4%. I know soon, early next year, in January, I'm sure there are going to be many other bills proposed for different types of tenants' rights, including rent limitations in certain areas close to transit. I know that was proposed and it didn't have the support, but that may change for January. So we'll see.
As the county executive indicated. There's a question here specifically, which came in earlier, and I want to make sure that the renter gets this answered. She says, she lives in a complex in Montgomery County and had a question. I suppose I'm supposed to renew my lease in October. One day I came home from work to an envelope in my door. When I opened it, it had papers basically telling me that my lease could not be renewed because they're renovating. It stated that I had the option to transfer units, but not like the one I'm currently in. The landlord also stated that basically she would have to apply all over again once she to move into a new unit. She lives across from somebody who currently moved out and their apartment wasn't renovated. Someone moved in 2 weeks ago. So first of all, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say, is this true? Are they truly renovating? Or are they telling you they want you to leave and giving an excuse of it being renovated? I would think that if they are truly renovating, they might genuinely have a reason to move you out. But in so doing, I would think, Nicole, if you could address this, you might have some rights, especially if you're in the middle of your lease, to have another accommodation. And if it's about a renewal, I think that you're not protected. I think that they can only offer you to apply again.
So if this has to do with needing to do certain repairs, and if the property is going to be inhabitable during that time and they're asking you to leave early, you should contact us. We can have an inspector go out and see if it needs to be condemned, etc. If this is planning on happening after your lease expires, even though your landlord has given you a reason that they're not renewing, by law, they don't have to, right? So if your lease is due to expire, they don't need to give you a reason to say why they're not going to renew. They can simply provide you a 60-day notice saying that they're not going to renew the lease. And they have no obligation by law to have a reason or an excuse. If you're interested in living in that community, but if it's going to be in a smaller location, for example, then it might make sense to renegotiate the lease, because if you're going to get less space, then you can negotiate, paying less rent. So it seems like this is a bit of a nuanced fact pattern. I recommend that you contact us via our email and just hash out those details a little bit more, and we can talk about potential options and try to negotiate with the landlord for you.
On the issue of data collection, I know that the Department of Housing and Community Affairs does an annual rent survey. I do believe the Office of Racial Equity is also, and perhaps legislative affairs, is tracking the disparate impact of housing instability according to race. Do you know anything about that, Nicole?
I'm not privy to that, but it's something I can research and we can discuss at the next town hall.
Okay, I do think that it is being looked at, and if not only is it being looked at by Montgomery County, but it's being looked at regionally and nationally. But the obvious is true. Housing instability and evictions disproportionately affect people of color and low-income families. So the obvious is true. The exact data, I'm not sure, but it is certainly looks that way. As far as the Housing Opportunities Commission goes, we have no one from the Housing Opportunities Commission on the call, but let me give you some straight and bad news about that. There is about 16,000 people in Montgomery County who have housing choice vouchers, and there is a waiting list of about 35,000 or more. And that waiting list is increasing all the time. There are many efforts to try to get the federal government to provide more funds for housing choice vouchers. Those discussions are literally happening every day on Capitol Hill and in the White House. But it doesn't seem, under the best of circumstances, that will happen quickly. The HOC does not operate on a first come, first served basis. They operate on a needs basis. And so while you may not have qualified 5 years ago for immediately, if your situation has changed and things are more dire for you, you may be put ahead of the line. That said, the Housing Opportunities Commission is a very difficult, in our experience, bureaucracy to navigate. And so you need to keep in touch with them, and you need to keep pressing. If you find that you're not getting responses from the Housing Opportunities Commission, we can help somewhat, and we have the scars to prove it. So, please let us know what we can do, and if you're hitting a roadblock there. But that's the way it works, to the best of my knowledge. David or Malek or Pat, is there anything else in the chat for Ms. Katravanos or Fernando, who's listening in?
I saw a couple questions about people who are about coming up on a renewal date and who are behind several months, about, how to get that prioritized, if you're not in court yet. But I was just glad to hear, Nicole mentioned that, we have to remember there's not a protection right now. They don't have to give a reason for a non-renewal. So I think that might have helped clarify a little, but I saw a couple questions about that.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I will say, that if the landlord, and we love this, but if the landlord does give a reason for not renewing and that reason is illegal, that's a problem. So if they say the reason we're not renewing is for some racial discrimination reason, or because you were trying to form a tenants association, or because you had filed a complaint with the code department, or some other pursuit of your rights or promised or required services, we'd love for them to say that and put that in writing. And so with Ms. Katravanos, that becomes a case that they can actually work on. The problem is that many landlords have the right simply not to say anything at all. As Delegate Wilkins said earlier, that is something we're fighting. We think housing is not something that should be treated as temporary, like a hotel or an Airbnb, but these are people's homes. And so if you're going to force people out of their homes, there should be a good reason, a stated reason that any reasonable person would accept.
Right.
Nicole, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for people in those situations where your landlord is refusing to renew and you don't have something that you can fall back on to say is discriminatory or is retaliatory, the best thing you can do at this point is, one, remember what the law is as far as eviction, right? You don't have to leave when you receive the notice, even if, because landlords sometimes will send you a letter saying you have to leave by X date. And just to remember that you do have time to be able to make arrangements and to contact the DHHS 311 and ask for housing stabilization. And this is what we spoke about earlier, is that there's different funds for assistance. If you are not, or if you're not applicable for COVID rent relief, but you need assistance finding housing or transitioning to housing, you should be calling 311 and asking for housing stabilization. And there are people that can help you find affordable housing, that can help you apply, that can help you potentially with your security deposit. If you have the amount of money to be able to pay rent in a new location, but you just need a minor assistance to just transition, there are funds allocated for that.
Malek?
Yeah, if you're on a month-to-month lease, are landlords required to give you advance notice when they increase that rent?
90 days.
90 days.
No matter, you can be on a month-to-month lease, on a year-to-year, 2-year lease, it's always a 90-day notice. It cannot be less than 90 days.
Thank you
And
so
if the landlord does not renew your lease and your lease terminates or comes to an end, then you are automatically month to month.
That is
So your lease is still in effect. It's just now you're month to month. Now, I would urge anybody who automatically goes month to month to request a renewal so that you have the option of renewing for a period of time or receiving, as the law requires, a 2-year lease offering. And that 2-year lease offering should have your rent increase for the first year and the rent increase for the second year. So you'll know what it is that they're going to be asking and you won't have those surprises. So just keep that in mind.
Matt, if I could, since we're seeing more and more, I'm hearing more and more, at least, instances of people requesting a renewal, but then just not getting one. I did want to throw out there that, you mentioned it does kind of feel like a gray area if you're getting an increase in your rent, a note, even a timely notice of an increase, is that a renewal in itself? And so, we're interested in I put my email in the chat in hearing about any of those notices or ledgers that have those kind of gray area things, because it's a little confusing at that point, I would say.
And it's a law school question for Nicole Katravanos, who's also a lawyer. But we've always sort of taken the position. I'm not a lawyer, neither is anybody other than Nicole Katravanos. But we think if you get a increase, it's like a renewal, or at least it should look like one. And but maybe you have a different opinion.
I want to look at the rent increase notice. If it's a landlord has a right to increase the rent on a month-to-month lease, right? So in that type of situation, landlord can say, I'm giving you 90-day notice for a rent increase. And if you stay, the same way the tenant has the right at any point to terminate that month-to-month, if you opt to stay for 3 more months, then you're going to be subject to that increased rent notice. However, if the rent increase notice isn't that plain and simple, if it starts offering you different terms, different kind of like amendments to your original agreement, then I would be under the position that, yes, that is a renewal, and it would need to look like a renewal, and it would have to guarantee the rights of a renewal under the original lease terms.
Right. Which also includes that 2-year offering.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it is a gray area. I don't think it's been actually challenged in court. It would be interesting to see how that comes about. But we are interested in that. The Renters Alliance, again, we're not lawyers, but we kind of think it is a renewal, and we'd like to pursue that a little bit further. Other questions, staff?
Hey, yes, Nicole, can you type in the chat your email where people can reach you? One of our viewers would like to contact you.
Sure. I'm actually going to be leaving town tomorrow for 2 weeks.
Okay,
And I'm sure that whoever wants to contact me is probably going to want some assistance earlier than that. So if you, like I said, if you contact ulta.intake@montgomerycounty.gov, our very well-versed investigators respond within 24 hours. And if you're not happy with the response of the investigator, if you'd like some more specialized attention, just ask to be escalated to a manager, and there is somebody who will be stepping in to provide assistance while I'm gone.
very good.
Thank you.
Anything else, David, Malek? If your question or concern has not been answered, please let us know at info@rentersalliance.org. We will circle back and offer you whatever advice we have or put you in touch with the right people. We are here to help. And let me also throw out one thing before Ms. Katravanos' computer dies. And that is that we're not only doing twice a month renter town halls, but we're also targeting individual apartment communities. We are generally interested, absent the emergency of the eviction crisis and the rent increase skyrocketing crisis. We're also interested in generally reaching out to tenants, providing education, helping you form tenants associations, giving you best practices to communicate with your landlords and property managers. And so wherever we can, we're going to individual communities, some that come to us with complaints, others that just, we would love to have in our network of renters. We have thousands of renters, literally over 10,000 renters across Montgomery County. And we like to keep increasing that because even though that sounds like a lot, there are literally about 400,000 renters in Montgomery County, and we're only scratching the surface. Imagine if we had everybody on the same page knowing what their rights and responsibilities are. That would be less work of certain types of work for the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs and lots more in some other areas. So we want to make sure that we're connecting to as many people as possible. If you know friends, neighbors who are interested or in need of these services, please let them know that we exist and how to get in touch with us. And of course, the information about the county services and how to get in touch with them. We all have to be good neighbors and good communicators. Anything else from our panel? Then also let me throw in a 2 cents of thanks to our vice chair of the Renters Alliance Board, Chris Perry, who's also a Vietnam veteran and one of our senior board members, and to my staff, and of course to Fernando Ortega for joining us from Health and Human Services to provide the overview on the COVID rent relief program. To Nicole Katravanos, as always, for her leadership of the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs and her expertise. Let me also thank County Executive Mark Elrich, who joined us earlier in the town hall to remind us that he is deeply concerned about the eviction crisis, about affordable housing in Montgomery County, and he intends to continue to work with the council, the old council and the new council, to put in some more protections wherever possible. And of course, to Delegate Janelle Wilkins, our board member, for her leadership and championing of renters' rights in Annapolis. So with that.
No, tomorrow's
What?
your birthday.
Oh, and tomorrow's my birthday.
It's
So
your
with that,
birthday. It's your birthday.
not a day over 21.
All right,
Okay,
here we go.
thank you, everybody, and good night.
Bye.
Good night.